Hello YouTubers, welcome to Big Buddha is Watching. I'm Big Buddha and today I'm going to be doing another of my, what I'll call my out of my comfort zone reviews. A theatre review this time of Miss Saigon. So first time reviewing a full length play, musical, whatever you want to call it, a full length theatre production. Um, the films really are my comfort zone. Yeah, films are really where I feel I can talk fluidly. I'm on shakier ground really. I feel when I'm talking about anything else, novels, literature, gigs, theatre productions, just because I haven't seen as many, haven't read as many, maybe don't have as many reference points or things to compare them to. So, this when I review a piece of theatre, this is really much more of a novice talking, really just saying what I liked and what I didn't like and what appealed to me. As I say, I mean, I could probably count on both hands the amount of West End musicals I've seen in my life. So I can only go by the ones I've seen and compare them to that. And the film adaptations, of course. But nevertheless, bear with me. I'll give this one a go. So, Miss Saigon, which I saw the other night, it would have been the 6th of September 2017 at the Birmingham Hippodrome. They're a current touring production. I think it's set up residency there for the following month, and then it's going to move on to other venues across the UK and do a month's residency in Southend, and I think they're going to Dublin as well and Edinburgh. So Miss Saigon, what do I know about Miss Saigon that I managed to glean from Wikipedia? It's written by, the guy who wrote the music is Claude Michel Schomburg, who is probably most famous for also penning Les Mis. So back in the 80s, he had two huge hit West End musicals, two big ones to rival the works of Andrew Lloyd Webber. He was probably in the 80s second to Lloyd Webber in terms of West End success. This and Les Mis, this was his follow-up musical to Les Mis. From what I've seen of what he's done since then, he's never really managed to match the success of those two early productions. But I mean, certainly, if you've never been to the West End, even I think even before the film adaptation of Les Mis, I think you'd have heard of Les Miserables and Miss Saigon. So these are the two that really broke through into public consciousness for him. The musical itself is based on Madama Butterfly, the Puccini opera, whereas that was set in the turn of the century Japan and deals with an American officer who marries a geisha girl. This transposes this story to 1970s Vietnam. So it starts with the end of the war. You get the main character Chris. He meets Kim, a 17-year-old Vietnamese prostitute. He spends the night with her and falls in love with her. But then you cut forward 3 years after the reunification of Vietnam, and after Saigon has been rechristened Ho Chi Minh City, and Chris is now absent from the picture, but Kim has given birth to their child. We then find out in flashback, we see how they got separated and Chris ended up back in America, but still pines for his wife and wonders what happens to her. And basically the rest of the story is him trying to find Kim again and reunite with her and the child that he doesn't know yet. He doesn't know of the child's existence. What can I say? I'll start off with the plus points. What I liked, there was a great production design on this, as you'd expect from a musical. The musical, I believe, was first performed in 1989 in the West End, and then moved to Broadway in '91, and then they both had decade-long runs throughout the '90s, and around the sort of the turn of the century, those productions came to the end, but there were sort of smaller scale productions that happened that were produced by Cameron Mackintosh, were probably the most successful theatre producer the West End has ever known. And then the larger scale productions in the past 3 years have come back and started touring the UK and being back on in the West End and on Broadway. I'm thinking Cameron Mackintosh. He's trying to get a film production off the ground, so he's trying to raise public awareness of the property. And this seems like a good way of doing it. I know there's been sort of muted talk of a big screen production, maybe directed by Lee Daniels or Danny Boyle over the past few years. So this is the third year into a revival that's going to go on into at least next year, and then we'll see what happens with the property after then. So what I was saying, yeah. So great production design. You know, the sets, they look amazing. The costume design, the lighting, and you know the performances and the singing voice and the range of the performers in the production, both from the main characters and the ensemble behind, was all top notch. You know, and great, as well as fine vocal work from the stars. You know, great dance routines, really well choreographed. So you know, the whole production looks amazing. I had a pretty good time watching this. I must admit. This would normally wouldn't. A few years ago, I wouldn't have said this would be my thing. Not that I'm wholly dismissive of musicals, but I'm. Prior to seeing Les Mis, and actually, to be honest, I haven't actually seen a stage production of Les Mis. I've just listened to the soundtrack and seen the film version. But prior to that, I would have said that my taste in musicals would have been much more lightweight. I'm much more a fan of the comedy musical and musicals where you have a much more of a jukebox approach to the soundtrack. You know, you might get much more of a greatest hits. I mean, I like Bugsy Malone. I like the Rocky Horror Show. I like when I was young, I did have Grease and Grease 2 were a guilty pleasure. Yes, even Grease 2. I know I know it's not technically good, but it was still part of my childhood, really. And I like Joseph and his amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. In fact, Joseph and his amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat is probably the only Andrew Lloyd Webber musical I ever got down with, because there was a lightness of touch. It didn't take itself too seriously. I believe I'm right in saying it was his and Tim Rice's first musical. I think after that, I liked it because it was funny. You know, it had it took a biblical story that I'd learnt in Sunday school and at primary school, but it had put hippies and Technicolor and just fun. You know, they had the Pharaoh, but he was Elvis Presley in it, and I really dug it. I think after that, Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice really started taking themselves too seriously, even with Jesus Christ Superstar, which I've never really been a big fan of, because that tonally that should have been more similar to Joseph, but even then you could see that they wanted to be taken much more seriously. But when you're doing a rock opera about Jesus Christ, I don't know how seriously you can really expect to be taken. But I'm going off topic. A diatribe about Andrew Lloyd Webber, who I'm really no expert on his work, apart from the few things that I have seen. Um, that's for another video, really. But yeah, as I say, I was more of a fan of the comedy musical and the musicals where you could sing. You could recall every tune, and I was less a fan of this style of sort of operatic storytelling musical where the music was really there to serve the plot, and the music was the plot, really, and it was really there to tell the story. I was much more a fan of the standout showpiece tune rather than the storytelling aspect of musical. But I don't know. There's something about Schomburg's work and the way he writes music and the subject matter that he takes on that's really chimed with me, both in this and with Les Mis, but Les Mis especially, which I really engaged with. That that really works for me. Something that I've noticed about this. I went to see the Phantom of the Opera last year, and the Phantom of the Opera has been going since the 80s, and usually when you see productions like this and the opera, the cast will be on the 1000th performance and of the thing. It'll be the 1000th time they've done the material, and it's not often you get to see performers do the 1000th performance. You'll never see a film where the actor's done 1,000 takes. You'll never see a TV show. You probably never see these days a stand-up comedy performance, for example, of someone doing a routine for the 1000th time. You might see. The exception to that might be if you go and see the Rolling Stones. They'll have probably done Satisfaction 1,000 times. But there's something about the 1000th performance of something which is really unique. I think a unique thing to behold, because technically the thing will be perfect. It'll go off without a hitch, and the performers will hit the dramatic range and the dramatic beats that they know they have to hit, and yet there is something you can almost tell. There's something almost workmanlike about it. It's not quite got the emotional. The emotion. What's the word I'm looking for? The emotional newness. The emotional in the moment quality that a film might have. That's the scene in a film is being performed for the first time that day, and that's what you're watching. So it's a different beast. I think a successful stage show is from a film for that reason, really. My favourite parts of the show were the showpiece bits. I guess that's what resonates with me. The showpiece scenes in this, there's two that really stand out. There's a street march after the reunification of Vietnam. There's the street march set in 1978 with everyone standing sort of marching in line and with the bayonets and the sun guard hats on, and the pointy ones. Which are genuine. I went to Vietnam 5 years ago. You do see people wearing them still. That really stood out. And the other one is the Engineers' US Fantasy. He does a big song and dance number, which is almost a parody of old school musicals about how it's his interpretation of what the US is to him, and that's a real fun piece at the end, and badly needed, because it takes place at the end. Well, I shan't spoil the ending for anyone who hasn't seen it. So yeah, I mean those are the things that I liked about the show. If I had any criticisms, it would be that while I admire Michelle Schomburg's ethos to make musicals less flimsy, you could argue that putting song and dance numbers into a Vietnam conflict might trivialise the war in a way. It would be, although, the big joke about the Vietnam War is it has the best soundtrack. I mean, you could argue that the great Vietnam War movies that have been made to date have been musicals essentially. The Doors playing in Apocalypse Now, and the Rolling Stones is always playing. It plays in Apocalypse Now, plays in Full Metal Jacket. The Deer Hunter is Platoon. They're more the classical music version. They're the more operatic takes on the Vietnam conflict. So I know that there is as I said, there is a movement to get a film version of this made. I think it's going to be a difficult nut to crack. It could be great, it could be terrible, and the reason for that is that tonally, I think it'll be a hard one to get right. Either you go for a super realistic take, you want to present the war as it happened, then you could trip up, because I know there is a movement to actually have this filmed in Cambodia and in Ho Chi Minh City. They could trip up then by doing that, but then having characters break out into song. The other way you go about it is you do a sort of film version of the stage show. You film it all on sound stages, and you do a kind of heightened reality version of the Vietnam conflict, in which case it could come across as artificial and insensitive. So yeah, I think it's. I'm surprised I'm not surprised they haven't managed to get a film version of this made yet, because you're gonna need like in Les Mis, you only got I think his name's Toby Hooper. You got somebody who genuinely wanted to make the film version and was passionate about the material. I think that's really what you're going to need to get to do the film version. Since its inception in the late 80s, the production has been played by controversy. Most notably, in the original versions, they had. That. It's only when I'm doing these videos that happens. I don't know what it is about this time of day. It makes me sound like I live in downtown Saigon in the 70s. I don't. It's not a rough area. It's just for some reason, I don't know. There's always a crime being committed, or a building set on fire, or somebody's having a heart attack whenever I'm doing these. I don't know what it is. What was I saying? It is a controversial show. The early productions had Caucasian actors playing some of the Eurasian parts, most notably Jonathan Pryce as the engineer. It was really the last time I think you could get away with doing that was the late 80s, having Caucasian actors put on the prosthetic eyes and bronzing the skin up, and essentially taking work away from Asian actors. This production I saw, it was from what I can tell, it seemed to be predominantly Asian actors in the Asian roles. So that's a step in the right direction, if you ask me. It's also had a controversy thrown at it from some feminist lobbies for its what they see as negative portrayal of the female characters, in particular the Vietnamese female characters, and the Taiwanese female characters are all. I think it's right in saying that every Asian female character in the production is a prostitute or a sex worker of some description, and the only Caucasian female character in it isn't. So but I mean, it's the story they can tell. Sometimes I don't know if it was intentional to portray Asian women in such a negative context, even if you can see that as a negative context. Yeah, I think that was just a byproduct of the story they ended up telling. But something that needed pointing out, sure, because it is there. So those are some of the maybe more negative things. I don't think. For me personally, it was. I don't know if this will ever become, one of my favourite musicals that I've ever seen. And I mean, it was a satisfying experience on the whole, all around. Despite a few, but I don't think it is wholly perfect. Because I think thematically there are some points where it is on shaky ground. The story's fine, and it holds your interest, and there are some great numbers in this, and the production I saw particularly is probably the best production you're going to get of this material. But it's just a shame that thematically. There are some elements that I think maybe, I don't know, maybe hold it back from being wholly perfect. There are some things that kind of niggled me about it, sadly. But don't let me put you off. It's not horrible, and you will have a grand old time at the theatre if you do decide to shell out your £60 and go see it. So there you go. That's me fumbling through my my theatre review, my initial theatre review. Yeah. As I said, I'm kind of out of my comfort zone here a little when discussing stage work, so I hope I didn't come across as too amateurish sounding when I was saying all that. I'll probably get back to talking about movies and something I feel I'm more adept to talk about it in the next few videos. So until then, thanks for sticking with me through these rambles, folks, and until next time, this is me, Big Buddha, signing off, and I shall see you all out there in YouTube land.